Very lucky. I have a critique group, many of who are meeting in this film, but we get together and we talk about each other's work. It's just so wonderful to have someone you know very well to give you some feedback, and we all trust each other that way. It's great support. As I walk through the orchard, it's really easy for me to imagine the old farmer and his wife walking with me. They are the ghosts who live on the land where I have my summer place. And there is some kind of inexplicable pull between people who have shared work and gathered, apples in the same orchard. Today, the cottages dot the perimeter of the orchard and framing the known and the imagined history of this farm. And knowing about these pioneers raises my enjoyment of this property. And by creating this series of paintings, I feel I have been a witness to their lives. Around 2000, my father was 90 years old and he was ill and dying, and I wanted to get his history written down. I had lots of stories that he gave me. And I didn't do any paintings, but at least I had his stories. And then I had the orchard became really important to me. There were clues around, rusty bed springs, stories about him being buried on the land, the old farmer being buried on the land, and there was china in a cabin that had the Norwegian flag on it. So these were little interesting curiosities that I wanted to kind of connect to. And so yeah, it was just at a period in my life that I started to reflect on history and the meaning of our stories and how important they are, and the legacy that people leave behind. Like the old farmer had all his fruit trees, his apples and that. He's long gone, but his trees are still producing. It's pretty special, really. And then I think about myself, and when I think about when I die, what will I be leaving behind? And what do we all find, what do we think is important? So anyway, and I think sometimes that my paintings and drawings, they'll be here maybe long after I'm gone, and that's some of the things I think about.
So my name is Bernadine Fox, and I am a visual artist who works in oil and canvas and mixed media assemblage. So the piece that was in Shapes of the Past was mixed media. It was oil on canvas with mixed media attached to it as well. I've been painting probably my whole life. I started at 10, working in oils, with lots of gaps in there for things like raising kids and making money and all the things that women do and must do when they are also visual artists. Every piece I do is ethnographically based, and that is that I'm talking about a narrative or creating a narrative about the human condition. So the piece in Shaped by the Past, The Family Way, is a portrait of a family which at first glance looks like it's a replication of a photograph. It's just the portrait of the family. But once you get up close and start reading the story, you get an understanding that to the children of those children in that family. For me, I think it may be different for other people, but for me, who I am is an artist. Whether I'm writing or I'm drawing or I'm painting or doing mixed media stuff, assembling things together, it is a part of how I express myself as a human being. So I'm not sure it brings me to myself or whether it really is an expression of who I am as a person.
My project had 2 points of inspiration. One was my daughter asked me if I would write down all the stories that her grandmother, my mother, had told her. And the other point of inspiration was having a whole pile of photographs. I had no idea what they were, but they were really interesting to me. I never thought of myself as a writer, so I did start by making paintings and a collage, but I realized very quickly that this wasn't going to do it. I had many more things that I wanted to say that could be contained within a series of paintings. So I started to write a book. At first I thought I was going to have about 50 pages. I ended up with 160. I finally decided that genealogy is a bit boring all by itself. There's a couple of pages that include a bit of genealogy, but mainly it's the story that's the thing. And without the story, these people don't come alive. And then also, you have to include what was happening in the world, because the context gives meaning to the family trials and tribulations and their decisions for what they're going to do. Then, since I'm part of this art group, what became a question is, how do I become part of the show? How do I, since I'm not doing paintings, how do I link myself into this group effort? So I made this book, and I made the cover, and it's here for people to read, and it starts with an introduction, and then it carries on, beginning to tell the story of the people that were my ancestors.
My name's Sheila Page, and I'm a member of an art critique group. We call ourselves the Art Force Collective. And back in 2007, we started talking about working on a project together. Some of us got started earlier than others, but it's been a real process, and I was keen to get going right away because I had had some classes in contemporary art with Lisa Burke and Emily Carr, and I wanted to do a series, my first series. And I decided my series would focus and build on my family, but also my family's connection with house sound and their experiences through their lives living next to the ocean. I called my series A Family at Sea. I'd already done a few works like the one on this cover that involved charts of local coastline and clinker-built boats and other things that resonated with me from my childhood. My family and I have lots of happy memories of our times in Howe Sound. We summered at Eastbourne on Keats Island, and there's all kinds of nostalgic connections I still have with Howe Sound and that life that we had there as when we were kids. This is a picture of my father and myself. You may notice that the child is somewhat reluctantly in the photo. My problem was I didn't want to cozy up to a big, dead, slimy salmon. As an adult, I can see why my father wanted me in the photo with the salmon. I was basically the same size, and he was very proud of his big fish. But I do have that feeling of reluctance, and the little octopus is sort of creeping into the picture here. Again, a feeling of something not being quite right. This was a tremendously emotional project for me. What drove me to keep going on this series was my emotional investment. The photographs in my family album were very sterile and very dry, people just standing there, and it didn't tell anything of the story. that was behind the photo. So that was my challenge. I wanted to suggest that there's more going on here than just a person standing there, and give an idea, give some clues to the viewer how they might bring their own story to it. You know, why has she represented these people this way?
My name is Joy Hanser, and I'm a Vancouver artist as of last 12 years, and before that Abbotsford. And I've been an artist probably since I was a child, less than a teenager, and my parents always encouraged it, so it just sort of naturally evolved for me in my life. Shaped by the Past is close to my heart because it was inspired by my father, who passed away last year at the age of 92, and had many stories to tell about his life and told them very well. But since he passed away and since we've started delving into our family history, it's gotten more and more interesting. This painting is, of course, my mom a lot later. It was shortly before her death in 1988. And to me, I think I captured her courage and her light spirit. She loved flowers and yeah, she was a wonderful role model. And these are the grandparents on my father's side and on my mother's side. I called this painting "Thank You for My Body" because they all gave me what I have, not only my body, but my mind and many characteristics that I've discovered that I didn't know came from them. But that's more or less a recent discovery. Well, I think the most that I gained out of it was more of an acquaintance with my family. Mm-hmm. Yeah, a deeper sense of who they were, even though I have a little reservation because I know that because they're not here to speak for themselves, I may be making up some of the stories, and that's okay.
You're an artist.
Yeah. That's why I was hoping my dad could still see some of those paintings, but it was not to be, so they are my stories.
So as far as my colleagues go, I think each one has had a particular concept in mind with regard to their heritage as different from my own. I started on this piece because I was really seduced by the materials, and that is that my husband was going to throw away a really cool piece of building paper, and I needed to retrieve it. And once I retrieved it, I thought, okay, now what am I going to do with it? I put it on the studio floor, and I just began without any concept. I didn't know where it was going at all. These leaves collage these different images here and here, just simple drawings that I've done from my sketchbook. I'm looking at it, and it is telling me what it was. I had the concept of the artist in her studio, and I had a number of things that are favorites in my studio, but I thought, well, I'll just go with what I have around me. Dad's lantern is it's one that he used to take out into the barn with him. He was a herdsman, and he took it into the barn with him to check on his cows. So now I have my dad, my mom, and myself, and it began to take shape as a family piece, and that's where the heritage idea came in. And so just being directed by the work itself, I thought the candle and now the three of us represented, I thought, okay, well, I'll go on with it from there to be a heritage piece. And that was the moment when the crossover between my two passions, my artwork and my genealogy studies, that's where the two collided, came into being. and I then knew that it was going to be about the heritage. So the idea of working on a piece of building paper suddenly took on new meaning.